Good morning. Happy Friday. Yes, we've made it through another week. So here we are again for my morning storytelling session. So if you've joined me earlier on this week, you'll know that we've been reading The Unmumsy Mum, and that is by Sarah Turner. I love this book. As I've told you guys before, I've read it before, so this is my second or third time reading it. It's a real warts and all sort of story about being a parent, bringing up children, having babies, which is so relatable to anyone, not just if you're a parent, a mum or a dad, even if you're a step parent, a carer, a grandparent. So many relatable bits in it, and it makes me laugh as I'm reading it, so you will catch me having a little smirk on my face at times, because some of the things just reminds me of when mine were little and the trials and tribulations, shall we say. So we're going to crack on and get a few more chapters of this done this morning. So get yourselves comfy and I will start. It's an interesting experience. You get told all about hand expressing and breast pumps and the like at antenatal classes, but the everyday reality of these things turned out to be more hysterical than I could ever have imagined. I had a proper good bash at expressing the first time around because I wanted James to join in with some of the feeds. It wasn't that I didn't enjoy breastfeeding, though I didn't much enjoy it. I never cherished the feeds in the way I know some mums do, but I have long since made peace with my lack of moment cherishing. It was just that the prospect of breast milk in a bottle seemed like a win-win situation, and I couldn't wait to crack out the pump and share the burden joy. Amazing things, those electric pumps, but Jesus Christ, it was all a bit ridiculous. I would sit on the sofa with one nipple attached to a suction cone being milked and the other nipple resting in a plastic shell to catch the extra milk that was leaking from the neglected boob, which had not registered that it was the other boob's turn. Having spent the previous 3 years financing agricultural machinery, parlours and robotic milkers aplenty, I developed a newfound respect for dairy cows through my personal experience of being milked while watching This Morning. James often joked about the regularity of boob exposure in the living room. There they are again, and he was right. It became so commonplace to have them out, some days I didn't bother putting them back in. And then there was the incident. A particular breast milk expressing episode that neither of us has quite recovered from. I woke up one morning with breasts that were more than a little bit engorged. They were like lumpy boulders. I started to feel all hot and bothered, fearing that mastitis was approaching. Usually, when lumps and bumps developed, I could sort myself out by kneading my boobs gently with my fingers to clear what I assumed were blocked milk ducts. Sometimes, the relief of the next feed would be overwhelming and my boobs would be ready to explode by the time the poor boys copped a mouthful. On this particular day in 2012, I knew I'd gone past the point of self-rescue, and after trying and failing to massage out the lumps, I called James up to the bedroom for what has definitely gone down as the most interesting moment of our marriage to date. He found me sitting on the bed in just my pants, surrounded by towels and warm flannels, with boobs to rival Katie Price's in her Jordan heyday. You're going to have to hand express me. Face of disbelief. You're shitting me. No, I actually need you to hand express me. I can't get the right angle to massage both boobs in full, and the pump won't attach now. They're so massive. It's really hurting. Bloody hell, right. And so it came to pass that my husband sat behind me on the bed and milked me in a completely non-sexual way, because there is nothing sexy about lactation. It gave me the greatest sense of relief I've ever felt. We drenched at least 2 towels in breast milk before admiring my back to normal boob structure, high-fiving and heading back downstairs for a cup of tea. That's marriage right there, for better or for worse. Many breastfeeding mums do a sterling job of looking glam all the time and manage to dress like they haven't given up on life. I do think that finding trendy, boob-accessible stuff on the high street is getting easier. Dungarees are now in fashion for starters. But I'm not overly imaginative when it comes to fashion. And there were times when I just wanted to choose an outfit without easy boob access in mind, when I fancied wearing something other than loose tops, wrap dresses, button-down tunics, or jumpers with secret feeding panels. There is no secret. I can spot a JoJo nursing top a mile off. Or when I was fed up with leaking breasts and the risk of waking up in a wet t-shirt because a breast pad had got sodden or dislodged between night feeds. I had almost forgotten those moments of midnight breast leakage and wardrobe agonizing until my friend texted me mid-feed to tell me she was fed up with squeezing her oversized boobs into bitty fashion and smelling like an old fridge. She's a keeper. There's an awful lot of pressure on mums to breastfeed. In light of all the benefits, I understand why encouraging mums to do so is really important. Sometimes an expert pair of eyes is helpful in assessing the baby's position or to offer advice around greedy baby syndrome. I think the technical term is cluster feeding, and the explanation is always a growth spurt. Sometimes just a boost is welcome, somebody to say, keep going, it gets easier. But I have also read messages from mums so desperate to carry on breastfeeding that they have cried through the sheer pain of feeds, continuing with bleeding nipples and an inadequate milk supply, because the thought of giving up is somehow worse. As if they have been told, keep going, it gets easier, one too many times, and have started to wonder what not keeping going would mean. What would it say about them and their maternal capabilities? I vowed to give you my honest experience of parenting, and I don't think breastfeeding should be an exception, though for some reason, I feel like there is an elephant in the room as I write this, shaking his trunk at my blasphemous suggestion that breast isn't always best. I honestly would recommend breastfeeding. I've lived it and I am a fan. But if you are reading this and the bad stuff has struck a chord in any way, I just want to put it out there, that it is absolutely not the end of the world if it doesn't work out. If you need, want, have to formula feed instead, because how your baby is fed does not determine your parent awesomeness rating. Sometimes mum deserves the best option too. I'm pretty sure even the elephant would agree with that one. Shit, I need some mum friends. When Henry was born, I didn't have much of a friend network. My school, uni, work friends were yet to birth any babies, the carefree bastards. And I was over 100 miles away from my sister, who, at the time, had just the one. I'm surprised I never punched anybody who used the phrase, just the one, before Jude joined the party. Just the one was bloody hard work, and at times, there was one too many for me to cope with. Even travelling up to see my bestie, who found out she was pregnant just 5 months after I did, required a 4-hour car journey. Hardly pop round for a cuppa territory. I couldn't risk being shipwrecked alone on Parent Island. From the moment I confirmed my pregnancy hunch by peeing on a stick prior to jetting off to that shitty Cos hotel, I'm scowling if you're reading this, James, I knew I'd have to make new friends. The prospect of making mummy friends filled me with dread. I have always felt intimidated by large groups of girls, and at work, I naturally formed my strongest bonds with male colleagues. So aside from my school and uni friend gems, most of the new friends I had made in my early 20s were male. Superb for nights out and banter and chats about online dating woes. Theirs, not mine. Not so great for chats about episiotomy stitches and nipple cream. Shit, I was having a baby and needed to find me some mum friends. Where should I look? I'd heard that one of the best ways of finding a mummy wolf pack was by signing up for NCT classes. My sister had done it, and I'd read about the groups. You meet other mums-to-be with similar due dates at local classes, and then regroup once all your babies have landed. Somewhere along the line, there is a Facebook photo of all the babies lined up on a picnic mat with the caption, the NCT crew, possibly accompanied by awkwardly crouching dads who have also been dragged along. It sounded just the ticket. I needed some NCT buddies in my life. But alas, when the time came to sign up online, there wasn't a group in my local area. Bollocks and arse, no NCT. This meant I would have to make pals the old-fashioned way. I would have to fly solo to some baby groups and hope somebody wanted to be my BMFF. best mummy friend forever. Our bog standard and free antenatal classes were more functional than they were social. In addition to watching the doll in the birth canal demonstration, we mostly passed around those giant salad server type forceps and chatted about maternity pads. We smiled kindly at the other parents, but there wasn't a list of email addresses circulated and a February babies reunion diarised at a local farm park. I was quite sure I'd never see those people again. I would instead have to make my own way to mum gatherings and ask people for contact details, which sounded much like professional networking events I'd been to, only with fewer skirt suits and more maternity leggings. By the time baby Hemi arrived, I was mentally prepped for this new friends task. 4 weeks in, when James had returned to work, I decided I would venture out to a few groups and take it from there. A baby group, a breastfeeding group, a stay and play session after baby clinic. Hell, I'd try them all. There was nothing to lose. Anyway, I did it. After at least 2 hours of frantically getting ready to leave the house each time, you better not have done another poo. Oh, for God's sake. I went along to these groups with a smile and the baby. At times it was a little daunting, particularly bursting through the double doors of the local town hall with the pram, parking it up and realising people were already mid-conversation. Daunting that I would have to wade in through the sensory baby toys, plonk myself down next to somebody and hope to fit in. That, by and large, there would be no men there and I would have to dip my toe into the female-only environment of cups of tea and chats about painful milk letdowns, totally obliterating my comfort zone. But I did it, and I'm bloody glad I did, because these groups were a godsend. And one time, I genuinely needed a chat about painful milk letdowns. I didn't struggle to make small talk with these groups of mum as I feared, because it's almost impossible to run out of conversation when you're accompanied by a small person. A baby is the best prop ever. Ask, how old is she now? Or have you had her weighed today? And you've banked about an hour of chatting about the birth and feeding and what percentile she's on in that little red book. You interact behind the comfort screen of your babies, laughing at their windy smiles and cursing their poo schedules. Hey presto, all of a sudden you found another friendly face to stop and chat with in the spa when you're out and about trying to get the baby to have that goddamn nap. That hour of tea and sympathy outside the house was priceless and gave me the much needed motivation to get dressed and not stay indoors watching Homes Under the Hammer for the 5th consecutive day. The other mums were all really nice, but I still hadn't sussed out how to take it to the next level. I needed to be braver. I needed to entrap some friends I could meet up with outside the organised breastfeeding cafes and baby clinic sessions. Friends who would pop round for that quick cuppa. Friends I could text when it kicked off at 3 a.m. and I needed to hear somebody else say, it's been a bit shit here too. I needed emotional support above and beyond the weaning small talk. As it happened, a chance meeting one evening on our then housing estate was a real turning point in my new friends' adventure. Said encounter stemmed from a bit of a dark place. By dark place, I mean James had returned from work that evening to find me once again in tears, snivelling about the chase. To be fair, it was the only programme I'd attempted to watch that day, and with Henry being a total arse, his screaming over the cash build around was the straw that broke Mummy Camel's back. I handed the baby over and stormed out of the back door. It was one of those moments where I wish I'd picked up something warmer to wear. But having just made a dramatic exit, it would have looked a bit crap to pop an arm back round the door for my fleece. So I kept walking. And eventually, after an hour angrily striding around the countryside, muttering, I won't put up with this shit, I felt calmer and decided to head back to check on the boys. Just a few hundred yards away from home, I bumped into a girl I was sure I had seen both at the antenatal classes and in the waiting room of the midwife's clinic. She must have had her baby by now. She was putting out her recycling and looked more than a bit pissed off, so I pottered over. How's it all going? I asked her. I wish I could remember her exact response word for word, but I can't. However, it must have been something along the lines of pretty horrendous, awful, or I've just about had enough, because I distinctly remember thinking, thank God for that. Not thank God that she was having an awful time, but thank God that it wasn't just me, that somebody else was saying, Jesus, what have we done? The relief was overwhelming. Perhaps I wasn't broken after all. Perhaps there were others like me having a shit time too. Perhaps I was normal. I felt like a weight had been lifted, like I had somehow shaken off the loneliness that had been making me feel lost and more than a little bit sad. I loved her instantly. We stood for a good few minutes describing all the ways our lives had gone down the pan, and it was such a release. We agreed we would meet up, not at a baby group, but at one of our houses. I think it was my first agreed play date, and I remember the joy of suspecting I had found someone like-minded, that I would have some proper company. I returned to James and a still screaming Henry with the biggest smile I'd had on my face in weeks. I series linked the chase after that. Hundreds of play dates and some quality moaning later, and the relief of opening up that friendship has never left me. We spent hours discussing the perils of no sleep and bonding over the fact that we both missed our pre-baby lives. We dreamed of work nights out and beach holidays, and it was our safe space to admit that away from any judgmental glares. But by the time Jude came along, we had moved away from the area and ironically downsized from that dream family home we could no longer afford. Expensive things, babies. So I could no longer drop in for cheese on toast with ketchup and moan about the kids when they both refused to nap. Oh, how I miss her, though we are still in touch. It was back to square one, and I was once again tasked with making a new set of mum friends in a new area. Second time around, however, I felt more confident about the new friends thing. I knew what I was looking for, and I felt braver. I discovered I could manage the "do you fancy a coffee sometime" approach, because after a couple of chats at Bounce and Rhyme, I had usually ascertained whether or not I would get on with someone. It's not an exact science, but when I've said, God, having a newborn is like torture, isn't it? Roll on bedtime, and being met with a puzzled frown, I've made an on-the-spot assumption that the mum I'm chatting to might not be the best fit for a park date. When she has replied, they can be such sods. I need a glass of wine, or better still, do you fancy going out for a glass of wine? I've made an on-the-spot decision that the mum could be a friend for life. I've met mums who are borderline professional in their diary management of play dates. Mums who have an impressively large number of friends. My mummy wolf pack is very modest in comparison, but I'm happy. The ones I have are keepers. It's true, I originally flinched at the very thought of mummy friends and play dates, but both have proved pretty essential to my survival these past few years. I'm quietly relieved that I now have a few close mum friends to my name who can talk to me about significant mum-related things like pelvic floor issues and doing it. I once feared I would find these motherhood conversations as dull as dishwater. Turns out I love chatting about stretch marks and postpartum intercourse as much as the next person. Power to the mummy friends. Mum appearances can be deceptive. Part of my mum friends journey, I'm just embracing journey now, has been the realization that mum stereotypes are just that, stereotypes. My experiences of meeting and talking to hundreds of mums, both mums I've met in person and those I've met virtually via the blog, have shown me just how narrow-minded I was before. I remember midway through my first pregnancy, I was out on an appointment and having a conversation with one of my customers about her sister, who'd recently had a baby. She's one of those, you know, Loa's voice, earth mothers, she told me. Despite having never met said customer's sister, I instantly felt that I knew the sort of mother she must be, an earthy one. That meant she'd be all cloth nappies and baby-led organic weaning and fair trade clothes, right? When Henry arrived, I plodded off to those baby groups for the first time. I almost wanted to discover some good old-fashioned stereotypes. Earth mothers, career mums, stay-at-home mums, yummy mummies, slummy mummies. It It's just easier if you can put people into boxes, isn't it? I didn't feel very earthy. I definitely didn't feel very yummy, but I hoped I wasn't entirely slummy. So I just guessed it would be best to make a beeline for the other non-earthy, non-yummy, non-slummy parents waiting outside Monkey Music. You know, the normal ones. And that is what I did. I chatted to the mums and dads who I thought looked normal. I realise now that this makes me sound like a totally judgmental knobhead, and that would be a fair assessment. But I think I was anxious about being judged by other mums. In my tired and self-protective emotional state, I assumed that anybody earthy, for example, would judge me, mainly for my reliance on disposable nappies and Ella's Kitchen strawberry pouches. It was much easier to pluck up the courage to chat to and make friends with the mums who looked a bit like me, i.e. slightly dishevelled, with baby sick and or Dairy Lee on their leggings, nearly always a promising start. And it is true that occasionally the mum stereotypes of myth and legend will prove a little bit accurate. Times when, despite ignoring the stereotype warning sign and trying to find common ground, there just hasn't been any. Once I tried talking to a mum outside of one of Henry's baby groups who was doing some crocheting. Granted, not my cup of tea, but I decided to strike up a pre-baby group convo anyway. I nodded along to her chat about crochet patterns and the family's totally organic lifestyle and how she would never go back to work again or indeed drink alcohol again because she just felt there was no need to do either now she was a mother. I remember quite clearly that she said mother and not mum. And I wondered if I would ever describe myself as a mother in conversation. Said mother also told me she didn't much like prams. And there I was detailing how I'd never attempted crochet, didn't much care for the price of all things organic, and couldn't wait to return to work as I wheeled my pram in, daydreaming about the bottle of wine in the fridge. But, and it's a pretty big but, that's genuinely the only time I can remember thinking, wow, this is awkward. Because by and large, the snap judgments I have made about other mums based on just one or two snippets of information have been way off the mark. Like the time I secretly labelled a mum I'd met a career mum. She was going back to work full time to a very good job. And she later told me it was all about the money and their mortgage repayments. And they were actually considering downsizing so she could take a hit on the salary and work fewer hours. Or the time I secretly labelled a mum happy staying at home mum because she had no plans at all to return to work, but who later explained that she simply couldn't pay for childcare costs on her low salary, and she would in fact have liked nothing more than a part-time job. All the time I met a very yummy mummy. Everything seemed designer, seriously everything, and she always looked immaculate. And I later discovered she lived at the dodgier end of town. Exactly where she lived was, of course, irrelevant, but it was wrong of me to assume at first glance that she was well off and living in luxury. I'd pictured her doing the school run in a Range Rover Evoque. She didn't even drive. Appearances can indeed be deceptive. I know it's impossible not to do it, to subconsciously categorise other parents based on the limited information we have, their appearance usually. But I do make a bloody big effort not to do this nowadays. Not just because I have since made friends with mums who the pre-parent me might otherwise have avoided. Okay, definitely would have avoided. But also because if no long-term friendship blossoms, it just makes life more interesting. How boring would it be if we were all the same? Some of the most hilariously frank and candid chats I've had about motherhood have been with mums I could so easily have written off as not being my type. I recently had the pleasure of meeting another mum I would have written off from afar. The mum in question, Zion, had just finished writing The Ultimate Guide to Green Parenting. And it's safe to say that prior to my conversation with her, I had never given any thought to how green I was as a parent. To be green, we'd surely have to abide by the aforementioned earthy way of life, get rid of the TV and start worrying about the parabens, There was no way she would be right up my street. What I actually discovered when I met her for coffee was some quite fascinating stuff about the health benefits and cost savings, hurrah, of all things green. We chatted happily about our children and our shared love of being outdoors. I'd never even considered our daily park trips and walks into town as being particularly green, but I suppose our love of escaping the house on foot makes us at least partially greenish. It was naive of me to assume a self-labelled green parent would be in some way judging me for my crimes against greenness. The chat inspired me to take action. Well, to fish James's discarded empty yogurt pots out the bin and list a couple of baby items on local selling sites, items which, if I'm honest, I would previously have taken straight to the dump. It's unlikely I'll be ditching the TV or checking the ethical consumer rating of all my toiletries anytime soon, because I love watching Corrie and I like the smell of Pantene. But it's fine to dabble in green parenting if you fancy it. It's fine to dabble in earthiness too. I try my best to dabble in yumminess every once in a while, and I've definitely experimented with slumminess. I've started to doubt whether anybody belongs firmly in any one camp. Parenting is not like the general election. You don't have to pick a side. In hindsight, I have been foolish to steer clear of certain types of mum. Foolish to try and mentally affiliate myself with a type. Having put quite a lot of thought into my own parenting classification since baby Henry arrived in 2012, I have mostly just concluded that I'm not any type at all. Unless that will do is recognise style of parenting. I've probably dipped into all stereotypes at some point. All hail the dabbling. I still don't get the crochet thing though. Right, that's the end of the chapter. So we'll finish there for today. Hope you all enjoyed that. I'll be carrying on with this again next week. Next week is our last week before Christmas, before we break up. So we've got a little bit of a Christmas program going on. So check out our Facebook page or our Instagram for more details on that. I'm going to be back online at about 11 o'clock today. We've got the lovely Zoe from the NAYC joining Luke and I this morning for a chat and a cup of tea. So if you can join us for that at 11, please do. If not, have a great weekend. At least we got to the end of the week. It's Friday. Have a good one, whatever you're doing. And I will see you all next week.